The last 120 days have been very important days to the stock market, and I think basically everything changed, and we hit a reset, and you better be aware of it. That was the day that we basically became aware of what ChatGPT and Bard was, and what artificial intelligence was going to deliver to us, and it changed the trajectory of many stocks as we became over that period of time more and more aware that the infrastructure of the internet had to be rebuilt, that the billion-dollar data centers, $200 billion data centers, had to be refurbished and rebuilt, and that there was going to be a tremendous exchange of money, and some people were going to make a lot of money, and others weren't. At the same time, we had interest rates going up. We had inflation going up. We were spending more at the grocery. So we weren't buying EVs. We weren't buying smartphones. We weren't buying toasters and refrigerators. So this affected the industry of the ecosystem, if you will, of the semiconductor. And I made some good money on it. And I hope that some of my followers followed me. And when I told them to get into SMCI and NVIDIA and several others, they did. I hope they did. But it's now changed, and it's changing rapidly. And so I felt I had a need to go back and review all the stocks in the BUS 12 and BUS 13 portfolios and say, where have they been over the last 5 years? Where have they been over the last year? Where have they been over the last 120 days? And where are they going? So I created this spreadsheet this past weekend, and I want to share it with you. Let me start with looking at the first stock alphabetically is Apple. Its 5-year average rate of return is 36.9%. This past year, 365 days, it has given you a return of 22.17. The last 120 days, since November the 1st, it's given you a return of 4.9%. Well, that basically says it's performing relatively close to what its 5-year average is. And we move on. But before we move on, I want to open my head up. Why is Apple not participating in this growth? Because they haven't stepped forward and told us what they're going to do. I would advise you, after you do your research, that you might want to buy Apple. And let me tell you why. It all goes back to, I believe it was July the 19th, 2019. Tim Cook was interviewed by Jim Cramer in a store. And Jim Cramer said, if we look forward to 2035, what are we going to remember Apple for? And Tim Cook gave him a direct answer: healthcare. Well, what I think is going to happen is that this artificial intelligence is going to get me to switch phones. I use an Android phone. I've always used an Android phone. I wear a Fitbit. I've always worn a Fitbit, and I'm not in the Apple ecosystem. But I think Tim is going to make this phone, this next phone or future phone, something I can't resist. And that is because I'm a senior citizen. I'm 79 years old. And my biggest fear, and my compatriots' biggest fear, is falling down. Why? Because when you fall down, you break something. When you break something, you get it fixed. Then you become stationary, then you die. That's the process, okay? So what you have to do to avoid dying is don't fall down. So I think Tim will put something in my watch and then on my phone to read when I'm getting dizzy, when I'm showing unstable, and it's going to alert me and say, sit your butt down, Kerry, and get yourself regrounded. I also then think that when I'm out on my jog run, he's going to tell me, sit yourself down, Kerry, you're about to have a stroke. Your heart's getting out of whack. I know they already have that. They'll do the same thing with cancer. I know he's going to give me a toilet that's going to basically scan my poop and my pee, and he's going to tell me, hey, you've got cancer in your body. Sit yourself down. So, that's Apple, and you need to be aware of that. So let's move on. AMD. Advanced Micro Devices, basically a CPUer, announced early December that they're going to become a GPUer. Their annual 5-year average rate of return is 65%. Their 1 year is 120%, because when they made that announcement, their stock went up 63%. Now, is that anything they're delivering today? No. Is it ahead of itself? I suspect it might be. Is there a price that it would be a good stock to buy because they quite possibly could be the secondary provider of GPUs behind NVIDIA, and we'll get to NVIDIA. Yeah, I think so, but it's got to be the right price. I mean, what business do you know that increases in value 63% in 120 days? Go into your little community and say, what would have to happen to that hardware store or that pharmacy for the value of that business to increase by 63% in 120 days? Well, if Amazon came in and said, well, we're going to build a tower next to you, and we're going to make sure that all our employees use your pharmacy, that might do it. But I don't think okay, let's move on. Now, opportunities. This is the other reason I do this. ACLS. It's a semi-fab provider. It provides services to the people who make the semiconductors. Okay. Average rate of return over the last 5 years is 58, almost 59%. Last year, down 12%. In the last 120 days, down 14%. Now, they provide a service. Why are they down? Because their earnings are down. Why are their earnings down? Because you didn't buy a smartphone last quarter or last year. Because you didn't buy an EV last quarter and you didn't buy a refrigerator. And that's where their semiconductor parts are used. Now, if you believe that's going to change when interest rates come down and inflation comes down and ACL will get back on its track of a 58% annualized return over the last 5 years, then that's a bargain. That's what I think. ASML, this is the people who make the big box over in the Netherlands that make the compute or the machines, the tools that make the wafers that make the semiconductors. Their big box costs about $200 million, I believe it is. Intel just bought 4 of them. But that's pretty much all they're going to sell for the next couple of years. And with that news, in the last 120 days, it went up 53%. Now, you tell me, is that reason to go buy this stock at $933 when it was $608? Or don't they have any other customers? Who's going to buy the next big boxes? Taiwan Semiconductor said, we're not in the market until 2030. And Samsung raised their hand and said, neither are we. Who's going to buy the big box? The only big box buyer is Intel, because Joe just gave him $10 billion, and Joe said, I need another 10. And Joe knows he needs Intel to become a foundry in making GPUs, or we will be dominated by whoever makes the GPU. Taiwan, after Taiwan is taken over by China. Okay, that's my take on that. Then I wanted to come down here. This is one I think is very interesting. This is Broadcom. Broadcom basically is in the switch and 5G business, but they also are a designer. And that's what they do. Think of them as an architect. You build a house. They aren't the carpenter. They aren't the plumber. They're the architect. They design things. Their biggest customer is Apple. They make or design, I believe it's 8 semiconductors that are inside your Apple phone. Now, as I said, I think Apple is going to get into healthcare. And I think Apple recognizes we've got to capture that market and we've got to protect it. We don't want to subcontract our intellectual property out. We want to keep it in-house. And we want to keep it under concrete and steel. And we want only one person to know how to access it. Okay? I believe there is no justification for Broadcom to go from $852 to $1,296 in 120 days. And that's calendar days. That's not trading day. That's calendar days. That's just my read on it. Do with it what you want. Okay, I've gone through some other stocks. Another one I want you to look at, Meta. Meta average rate of return is 25.8%. Thus far this year, they're up 237%. In the last 120 days, they are up 55%. Okay, what is Meta doing? Have you seen Facebook change dramatically that says, hey, I need to spend more time here in the last quarter? I don't think so. you're going to see the biggest receiver of money in the last quarter was NVIDIA. They sold their chips. They sold them through Supermicro Computer. Who bought their chips? Their largest customer, and Jensen admits this or shares this in the earnings call, was Meta. Meta bought more than anybody else. So that tells me Meta has had a tremendous outflow of cash. And is there any inflow to offset that? Have you spent any more money on Facebook in the last quarter than you did in the preceding quarter? Have you followed any more ads? I read that through artificial intelligence and Jensen's computer chips, it's making Meta's search and presentation so much better. I haven't seen it. Be careful of that. Or go to my cheat sheet, and I'll tell you where I think the drop price is, because I think it's gotten ahead of itself. Again, 25% over the last 5 years, 237% over the last year. That's almost a 10-point increase. All right, so I go through these, and I'm going to make this available on my website. Once I refine it down, I'm still working on it. But I want to also show the one that you're all asking about, NVIDIA. A 5-year average return of 72.5, 1-year return of 233, 120-day return of 86. Is NVIDIA a phenomenal company, and will it continue to grow? I believe it will. Do I want to buy it at $788? No, I do not. So I have done some analysis and some research, and I have a price where I want to buy it. But I don't think the structure, the whole company increased in value, doubled in value over the last year. You may. Okay. Rambus is also a chip maker, memory chip. To understand the difference between a processing chip, that's a CPU or a GPU, that does a process. Switches on and off and does a process. But then it doesn't have a memory. So you have a chip that has a memory that says, I remember what you just did, and here, I'll feed it back to you. So they interact, okay? Rambus is probably going to be the chip that's in your car. And as you can see, they have grown well over the last 5 years. Why? Because the EV market exploded over the last 5 years. But in the last year, they've only grown 28%. In the last 120 days, they've grown 3.4. If you believe that EVs are here to stay, you need to own Rambus. Okay? 112% from right now 28 and going down. This is one that those who watch my channel know that I've gotten into Aehr. This is Aehr Test Systems. They test. A wafer is about the size of a 78 album or a 33 album, and it has a million, I think it's a million semiconductors on it. I mean, they're teeny tiny, and 80% of them work. 20. That means 20 don't. Somebody has to test them. Somebody has to run electricity through them and have the ability to look at each one of those million and say, that one isn't working. Don't send that to a jet airplane. Don't send that to a guided missile. Don't send that to an autonomous automobile. So that's what Aehr. Now, their biggest customer was in the EV, in specific Tesla. So they're down 50% this past year. They're down 33% in the last 120 days. If you believe that EVs are coming back, dig into Aehr and see what you think. And let me know what you think. Now I know your eyes have just tumbled down to APLD. Unless you're a regular on my channel, you have no idea who they are. They're a data center. They're a data center up in northwestern United States. They're a mid-sized data center. They're nowhere near as big as your Apples and your Facebook data centers. They rent space. You're a business and you're processing your data and you want to rent space. Well, you go to Applied Materials. Is that what it is? APLD. and you rent the computer. Now, their biggest renters are cryptocurrency, data miners, or Bitcoin miners. And so also, their biggest customer was in the EV market. So they had been growing at 3,000% per year over the last 5 years. And then their business slowed down. Why did it slow down? They couldn't get infinity bands. You know what an infinity band is, don't you? Well, of course you do. That's the band that has replaced the Ethernet cable that you have on your computer. It's how the computers talk to each other. And this infinity band has the ability to handle the maximum amount of data that's moving from these new form computers. And he can't get them because he's a small data center. Who gets them then? Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple. The big data centers. He can't get them. So he has basically had to gear back his operation, not being able to take on the hundreds of new clients that are coming and saying, I want to. And so his price has tumbled. Okay? Then on top of that, he's gearing up, and he's up in northwestern United States. I think it's either South Dakota or Montana. And he had a power outage in the middle of January. They ran out of power. So his prices tumbled. As you can see, it went down 18% in the last 120 days. Is this an opportunity? Before he couldn't get his infinity bands, he was growing at 3,000% a year. I think it is. But then you look into it. You make a decision. EXCR is one of them as well. Then I want to just share Tesla. Tesla's down here. It's down, or its 5-year average is 179. Its 1-year rate of return is a negative 5%. And in the last 120 days, it's down 6.6. Again, this all goes back to the premise, do you believe that EVs are going to dominate our world because they don't emit carbon, because they don't pollute our system, because they are more efficient? Do you believe that? Now, they have some drawbacks. Personally, I'd only want one of them. Right now, I'd want my BMW to travel long distances, but I could have one of them. If you believe they're coming back, then you need to know where to buy Tesla. It's not at $205 a share, at least not in my opinion, and that's on my cheat sheet as well. So this is what I do on my weekends. As you might tell, I've got a cold, so I'm not going anywhere anyway. But I'm looking for opportunities, and what I have realized, it doesn't matter what ticker symbol I own. I'm not in it to own Amazon or Google. I'm not in it for that. I'm in it to make money. And if ASML is going to give me a 58% return as it rebounds back, then I want to own it. If Apple is going to keep me from falling, help, I fell and I can't get up, but they're going to keep me from falling, then I want to own Apple. But I have to justify why I'm going to buy these stocks. Why would I buy Broadcom when I believe Apple's going to take the design, the architecture of their chips that are going to keep me from falling and tell me when I've got a cancer or a stroke? Why would they leave them at Broadcom's headquarters? I think that's precious data. I think that's the gold that, what's his name, Matthew McConaughey is talking about. That's the gold. And that's what's going to change the world. Now, the other thing I just wanted to touch on, I hope you saw the release that Neuralink has put a chip in a individual's brain who could not operate a computer, and now he or she is able to move a cursor on a computer screen with their brain. Whoa. Process that for a second. A chip in your head that can move something out there electronic with you thinking about it. How far is it from a chip in my head that has all the knowledge that ChatGPT or Gemini or any of them have, so I don't have to go to college? I know every answer. Anything you want to ask me, I can answer it. Now, what I have to learn is what questions to ask myself so that I can capitalize on this wealth of knowledge that I'm going to have embedded in my brain. Now, am I going to live to see that? Only if Apple gets me a watch that keeps me from falling down. All right, I'm Kerry Grinkmeyer. I got a cold. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it enlightened you as to how I think. And you say, I need to get into that guy's head more often. Well, I share my thoughts every Friday at our Stock Talk, a Zoom call. And I do that with our Platinum and our Premium Plus members. So go to the website, look at what we have to offer. And if you'd like to get into my head a little bit more, come join us. All right?